so much for being here. I'm so glad to see you all. I know we've got some new faces and we've got some old friends that are here today, so thank you. I appreciate that. So most of you probably already know Dedra Walker, but I'm going to introduce her to you. She's just been doing a fabulous job with this Inspire Author Series. So if you haven't come to any of these before, you're going to want to continue coming. We have had some absolutely fantastic speakers in this series, and we will continue on through the rest of this year and into next year. We have lots of events this summer, so be sure to check out our calendars or check online. If you're not on my email list, get on that list, and so you can find out what all is happening here at the library. So without further ado, let me introduce to you Miss Dedra Walker.
And again, thank you all so much for coming out for the Inspire Author Series. I am Dedra Walker. This series was like a brainchild with my mentor and with we wanted to bring authors to Barrow County, and I would say the late Johnny Smith. This was just one of the things that we wanted to do, and we were able to partner with the library, and so it's just been such an amazing and exciting series. I thank you guys for coming out and for your support. And so today we have Dr. Arthur Vaughn. Dr. Arthur Vaughn, he's a native from New York. He currently called Cobb County his home. He, in his 20s, he has a 20-year career in higher education, including leadership roles in Kennesaw State University and Morehouse School of Medicine. Okay. His first book was The Survivor's Remorse, The Health Power of Faith. And it was his chronicle of the physical and emotional journey that he shares with his readers about his heart transplant and the recovery process. Okay. Later, he wrote a book, and that's what he's going to speak on today, Through Her Eyes. And he's narrating his family story from enslavement through the Great Migration through the lens of the women who lived it. Okay. So today, I am so excited to have Dr. Arthur Vaughn here. He's going to share with us his stories as he recounts the different stories through his grandmother eyes and the women who lived it. So without further ado, if you guys will help me welcome Dr. Arthur Vaughn.
Good afternoon. And thank you. I want to thank the Winder Public Library and Ms. Walker for having me here today. When Dedra contacted me and said, "What month do you want?" I said, "June." Juneteenth is coming. I want to do June. I don't want February. I don't want April. I want June. And she was very accommodating to me, and I appreciate it. As she mentioned, in 2019, I went from running the Peachtree Road Race, playing golf, to 3 days later doctors telling me I'm in heart failure. 14 days later, I had a new heart. After being on the list for 4 days. So I'm just happy to be here. You ask me how old I am, I'm gonna tell you 25, because that's how old my heart is. The rest of my body, a little different. But thank you all for having me here. And I want to start by reading an excerpt from Through Her Eyes. And as I get older, I take my glasses off to see them close, right? Born on March 13th, 1911, I am the great-granddaughter of Randall Dawkins, Rosa May Hill. I suffered through the Jim Crow South and the segregated North. I have lived through 2 world wars, the Korean War and the Vietnam War. I was a young adult during the Depression years. I participated in the women's liberation movement, and during the 50s, 60s, and 70s, I participated in the civil rights movement. I witnessed women and blacks becoming full citizens when we were awarded the right to vote. I've been colored, Negro, Black, and African American, and blessed to see the turn of a new century. That is the theme from my most recent book, a series of short stories called Through Her Eyes, One Family's Journey from Enslavement to the Great Migration. So the cover of the book shows my grandmother in 1950 at my mother's high school graduation in Brooklyn, New York, right? Now, we'll always say I'm a native New Yorker, but my adult life has been in Marietta, if you're not from there, right? So next year will mark 30 years I've been in Marietta and in Georgia. But what I wanted to talk about today was how this book came to be and how others can learn from it. We see all the time in the last, let's say, few years, I can't quantify it, there are places and spaces in America that want to erase or rewrite African American history as if it's not part of American history. I've recently been doing some work, I move around a lot, in Louisiana at Dillard University. Most of my work these days are helping financially challenged historically black colleges and universities get on the right track. So there's plenty of work, and that's what I do in my retirement. Because after the transplant, they retired me. They said, you're done. My doctor said, if you go back to work, that's up to you. But as far as we're concerned, you're done. What paperwork do you need filled out? So there you go. So in Louisiana, just this week, they announced this new company is going to come in and do the history curriculum. The same company that went to Florida that said we can't, that started banning books, all right, selectively. Banning books of not only black history, but Asian history and history from other races and cultures, right, for whatever reason. So I believe that these stories need to be told because they're part of the fabric of America, right? So where are they going to get told now? They're going to get told in the public library. They're going to get told at the local church. They're going to get told at festivals and carnivals. They're going to be told by people who are continuing to write books, and in academia, filling the hole in the literature is what we call it. There are plenty of stories, and I was intentional when I wrote this book. I didn't want to write Roots Part 4, or whatever number they're up to, right? So you're not going to read a book about, and this is not a criticism of Alex Haley, right? But we want to add a different lens to what we talk about. We're not monoliths. We are very diverse people, right? So that is one story and a valuable story. Roots, when I watched Roots, because I'm not gonna lie, I watched it before I read it, because I was a little kid when Roots came out, right? It introduced me to something that I was not familiar with by watching that series. And then Mama Flora's family, his maternal side of the family, right? But what I wanted to do was fill a hole in the literature, because everybody's story is not Alex Haley's story, right? And your story may or may not be. So I said, I'm gonna do research, because I'm an academic at heart, and what is this story? So I often, when I have these conversations, I talk about, how do you do that? People always ask me, I want to trace my family history, I want to know more, how do I do that? So that's what I'd like to share with you today, and how this book came to be. So I am one of 20 grandchildren. My grandmother had 8 kids. 2 of them she lost at birth, so 6 survived, right? So out of those 6 children, I'm one of 20 cousins, right? 20 grandchildren. But my grandmother used to do this, and she used to write all of us letters, right? I was the first male in my entire family on either side to get a college degree, and I couldn't stop, so I said, let me go do this 3 more times, we'll get 4 of them. But I'm keenly aware from working on a college campus, African American males aren't in college at the rates of our African American women. I have 2 male cousins who have degrees. There's a whole bunch of boys, and the rest of them chose something else, right? A lot of the women went out. But when we were young, and until her death, my grandmother would write all her 20 grandchildren letters. She was very big on letter writing. So she'd always send letters and whatever it was about. I remember vividly, my cousin wrote her a letter, and my grandmother wrote back, are you in love or lust? And my cousin shared that, and I was like, wow, Grandma, you don't know about those. What do you know about lust? Grandma, immaculate conception. No, what are you doing right now? but she would write us letters, and that one stood out because I was like, Grandma. Yeah, if I had birds, let me clutch them. But yeah, so she would write letters, and about 5 years ago, I got divorced. It's an unfortunate part of life. But in the movement process, I unearthed the letters my grandmother wrote me back when I was in college. Or when I first moved to Georgia, because not long after moving to Georgia, my mom died. And she wrote a letter about how she lost her mother when she was a young woman. And how she had to raise her brothers and sisters because she was like 13 when her mom died. I had at least made it to 23, right? But I unearthed these letters, and it was after transplant, and I was retired. So I had a bunch of free time. So I said, you know what, I've been talking about doing this research forever. Why do I have to wait until whenever to do it? Let me do it now. So where do you start? I tell people, start where you are. I started with my grandmother's letters. I didn't start with Google. I started with where I was. And I tell everybody, start where you are. And then I'd read and some of it I retyped, and I had to fix some English and grammar, and she'd talk about this, and then this, and then come back this, and then come back over here, and it'd be all over the place. So I just typed it directly how she wrote the letters. And then I tried to find some level of sense to them. Because she'd be all over the place. But, you know, she was a senior by, right? So I started there. And then I said, you know what? I never understood it, but my parents, and some of your parents might do it, every funeral, they collected the funeral program. I said, what are y'all saving these programs for? They're gone. But yeah. So I said, but I got it. Because for us, it helps plug holes in your family history. There's certain things they're going to talk about in that program and in obituary. And I said, I didn't know. I didn't know my great-grandfather was drafted into World War II, but because he was a clergyman with a bunch of children, he didn't have to go. I didn't know that my grandfather was drafted to, I might have got that wrong. My great-grandfather would have been in World War I. My grandfather would have been in World War II. But by then they had migrated from the South to Philly to Brooklyn, and he worked in the Navy shipyard. Now the Navy Yard, if I grew up in Brooklyn, we called it the Navy Yard, but they weren't building anything. But during World War II, that's where they built ships. So my grandfather had a bunch of kids. I learned from looking at his history that he was drafted to World War II, didn't go, because he was building ships in the Navy Yard. But you also, when you did the research, I learned about the attitude of our military for World War I and World War II. They didn't want them anyway. They didn't want them anyway. And it's clearly written that Lyndon Johnson wanted a lily white war until white women said, hey, you send all our men off to die, who are we going to marry? And he said, oh yeah, you're right. Then he started sending other people. So even then, it wasn't because you were wanted, it's because we didn't want other people to do all the dying. Right? But it also speaks of advocacy. Because whenever you want to talk about these women who happen to be white, they were advocating. They said, wait, Mr. President, you got to send some other people. Right? But it talks about advocacy, which I can link to the women's liberation movement, right? That could have been really considered an early part of the women's liberation movement. Because not that liberation was, I'm liberated to have a husband. I'm liberated because I want you to hear my voice. I want you to hear my concerns, right? So I started there, and I started going through funeral programs. Again, I haven't touched a computer yet. And I'm making linkages of people. I say, who's Cousin Rose? I could never figure out. We had this cousin that we had to call Cousin Rose. And I explained them, like my kids call my first cousin, like she's Cousin Gina. I had a kid once call me my first cousin. Wait. We're not peers. We don't do that. Well, my mom, I'm not your parents, and I'm actually older than them. You can call me, I was a soccer coach. You can call me Coach. You can call me Coach Vaughn. You can call me Dr. Vaughn. You can call me Mr. Arthur. But what we're not going to do, and they got it, right? So you start where you are. I've limited on time, so I'm not going to try to be too wordy. But I went through these programs and found out these holes. And I found out who Cousin Rose was. So, Papa was a Rolling Stone. That's one of the sections of the book. That's one of the chapters, right? My great-grandfather was a Pullman porter in South Carolina, in Stick, South Carolina, right? And he'd be on the train, and he met this woman, Grace, on the train. Well, Grace and great-grandpa, they did adult things, and this baby came. They didn't talk about this baby once he met my great-grandmother, his wife, until after she passed. And my grandmother didn't, my grandmother thought this was a friend of the family's kid, because that's who was raising him. And so they get to Philly, and my great-grandmother passed, and that's when we found out who Cousin Rose was. It was my grandmother's sister, but they never, and I learned that my grandmother's always come from a different time. You acknowledge the kid, a man, if you wanted to. If you had a kid out of wedlock back then, my grandmother used to say, If any of my cousins, if you had a kid and you weren't married, she'd always say, you ain't supposed to have nothing to do with that baby, just send some money. And I'm like, Grandma, how do you act with your kid? But that's what she wrote. That's what she wrote. She said, just send some money. It's sort of like, she don't. So we found out who Cousin Rose was. I had to do research, and now I found out, oh, that's actually my Aunt Rose, who we call her Cousin Rose, because she's my grandmother's sister, older sister at that. And Rose didn't know who her father was. She used to think, who's this creepy man trying to be my friend? And so it had to come out that who this creepy man was actually your dad. So we started with doing that history. Then, family photo albums. I said, who are these people? And there's pictures in here that I was able to unearth. And then, through the research, I found the family plantation. So in Union County, South Carolina, anybody from South Carolina? You know what Union County is? All right, so this Paradise AME Church was built by my ancestors in the middle of nowhere after the Civil War, right? They got permission to build this church. That church still goes there. So I drive up, my cousin say, you gotta go to the church, you gotta go to the church. I drive the 4 hours from Marietta to Union County. I pull up to the church literally in the middle of nowhere. There's woods, that's it. But all of that was the plantation that Bill Dawkins, and remind me to talk about Bill Dawkins when I finish the story. It's gonna get interesting. All right, I get up here, I pull up, I see these 4 tombstones on the side. I call my cousin, you had me make 4 daggone tombstones. She said, Arthur, shut up. And walked to the other side of the building. So I walked to the other side of the building. And I wish this huge cemetery with tombstones all over the place. And it's all my ancestors. So I got to take my shoes off, because this is where my enslaved and free ancestors are buried. And where they toiled before emancipation, right? And there's headstones all the way back, enslaved and free. There's some where you just have a rock because there's a marker. You don't know who's buried there, but you know somebody's there. But this cemetery is full of people. And I'm taking pictures and I'm writing dates of birth and death. Now I'm in a fraternity called Alpha Phi Alpha. I found out one of my ancestors that would make us high five on his tombstone. I said, no, just kidding. no, just kidding. But I learned things about my family I didn't know, right? So I'm just taking pictures, and every time I've been there 3 more times since then. Took my kids, I said, take your shoes off. They're like, Poppy, I'm gonna take your shoes. Because this is hallowed ground, right? But then I met the people at the church, because I look on the church, the deacons, when they built this new edifices, Dawkins, that's the family name, Bill Dawkins. Dawkins. I said, wow, they're all over this church. So I said, I gotta meet these people. I remember this church in the middle of nowhere, South Carolina. They don't meet every Sunday. So I went on a Sunday, why did they? I was like, how you not here on Sunday? It's church. They meet twice a month. So you got to meet the rights. I was like, oh God, this is hard. So I had to call my pastor, who's AME pastor in Marietta. I said, can you help me get to this pastor at this small church? And he did, and I went to the right Sunday and got to meet him. I found a whole bunch more history of my family. Still haven't touched the computer yet. Then I see Bill Dawkins. I had to touch the computer there, because I need to figure out where he was buried. Now, who is Bill Dawkins? He's an Irish, Dutch, Scot. So he's white man, right? Who came over here in the 1800s, early 1800s. He was one of the largest landowners in South Carolina. He never got married, but he had impregnated these 3 enslaved women. And I'm the lineage of one of those 3, right? Never got married. You'll read about Randall, his son. You'll read about other people and how he treated them differently, right? He didn't know Randall, and I learned this from the records of the church. Randall was an abolitionist. So imagine the slave master's son ends up being an abolitionist. So he's got freedom because of who he is. More freedom than everybody else on the plantation, right? That is not white. But he's against what his father wants to do, when his father, I found out, was literally in the room when South Carolina decided to succeed the Union. And he helped fund the Civil War. And then I found the pardon that Bill Dawkins got from Abraham Lincoln after the war. So he was pardoned as many people were. We found a copy of the pardon. How did I do that? You gotta go through the records. That wasn't gonna be online. I had to go to Union County, South Carolina, and start going through records. And that's why when there's a lot of young people in the room, they're like, what's microfiche? Who's this Dewey Decimal? So they don't know that. They know Google. They do everything online. And I can't blame him. When I finished my last degree, Google Scholar was a friend for peer review. But I had to do that research, right? So I find out this man. I said, I want to see where Bill's tombstone is. So I look it up. I had to drive 20 minutes around all these woods because my family's all buried at the AME church. Bill's at the Presbyterian church 20 minutes away. All that land used to be the Dawkins. All of it was the Dawkins. So I said, where were they growing in South Carolina in the 1800s? So I learned what the cash crop was, and it wasn't cotton. It was cattle, it was potatoes, sweet potatoes, and other things, right? I find Bill's will. Bill left the land to one to a nephew, right? Oh, his nephew from his brother, so this is a white young man. The other 2/3 were left to 2 of the 3 women that he had children with. He didn't leave any to mine because he found out his son was an abolitionist. So how do you give you back? I ain't giving you nothing. But they had to fight for it because the nephew was like, nah, these black women aren't getting anything. They had to go to court and fight through the system. And I believe it was the 14th Amendment to the Constitution is why they were able to secure that land and then build that church. But we found it all through the public record on paper. None of that was found on the internet, right? But I found copies of these things as well, and I found where these women fought for it. Now, they died soon after of old age, but our family ended up owning that land. Well, sort of family, because this is other women that I ain't from, but I got to figure how many cousins removed that is. The 8th cousin, 10th removed, I don't know. It's close. It's further enough away that if I met one and wanted to marry her, my kids would be all right. But I'm told, look at this, I have no more children. But you find that kind of information. So I started writing and writing. And then I had to, clearly I wasn't here for all the conversations. So this book was taking the facts and then looking at historical context. I didn't know Lyndon Johnson wanted a lily white war until I read it. Right? And it's documented. Those are his words. Until the white women said, we can't send all our men to get killed. That was all documented in history books. So I wrote a book, and the story doesn't sound like Ruth's. My great-grandfather was never a sharecropper. He refused to work in the field. He was a minister. He was an artisan. He said, I'm never going to work in the field picking anything. He just refused. So he found another path, right? And he moved from Stick, South Carolina to Philly. My great-grandmother passed. He married this other woman, had more kids. And then they moved from Philly to Brooklyn. They bought a brownstone in Brooklyn for about $8,000. That's now worth a little bit over $2. I won't let my cousins sell it. They don't want to sell it. But they require my signature since I'm the sister. I'm like, yeah, it ain't gonna happen. I tell them, buy dirt. That's the one thing they're not making more of. You sell it, you'll never get it back. But I wrote this history and I learned about the family. But then I did go online and use the ancestry.com. Tell me how long I got. I don't want to be too long with it. I'm all right. So then from what I did, then I did use ancestry.com. I had to connect. Who's Pompey Hill? Who are these names I don't know? I get with my aunts, and I tell my children all the time, remember, I had 8 aunts and uncles through blood, but 16 through marriage, right? There's 1 by marriage and 1 by blood left. 2 aunts. Everybody else is gone. I'm the youngest of 8. There's 5 of us left. I tell them I'm quickly becoming not an ancestor, but a senior. I said, I'm 55, I'm quickly becoming a senior in the family, right? So I tell them you gotta learn this stuff, because if we don't teach it to you, you're gonna forget. People don't have family reunions. People say, what do you think the first things African Americans did after emancipation? What was the first thing we did, other than jump up and down and cry and be happy? Trying to find your lost people, right? So people ask me, one of my friends, and she called me and said, why do you black folks all these family reunions with these t-shirts that all match? And at the time I was like, I don't know, that's what we do. I don't know. But I researched it, and exactly what you said. After emancipation, family members had been sold off. So one of the first things we did was try to find those who were sold off. Then they might have been sold to this plantation, you go there, they've been sold again. We had that Civil War. People got all over the place during that, and you were trying to find it. You were trying to have a reunion of your family. So that's how family reunions in African American community began. Was trying to find your family, you reunite them, and not lose that common connection. My grandmother used to always talk about, we need to go buy a plot of land, and all of us build houses. Like, I don't live that close to all y'all. But I also learned through this research, right, But that's what they did. When my family migrated from South Carolina to Philly, it wasn't just Benjamin Franklin Hill Sr., it was other people from the family, other people that were connected from that plantation they were freed from, all moved. I learned that Benjamin Franklin Hill Sr., my great-grandfather, his mother was our first ancestor born free. She was born right after the Civil War, right? That's wrong. She was born in 1860. She was the last person born in enslavement. His big sister was the first person born into freedom, right? So we learned these things about them, but we learned why we have family reunions. And I told my cousins, I said, we need to have a family reunion. So we the elders now. Because my two aunts that are still living, I was with one of them at her granddaughter's graduation. She thought I was somebody else, all right? So they're here in body, but their minds are not, all right? Not really. Did I get that right? Yeah. I wanted to make sure I still had two aunts left. I had to think about that because we lost our aunt and uncle in the last year. So we want to get together. We said, cousins, we need to get together. We know each other. We knew every Sunday we were in Brooklyn, no matter where we lived in New York. Sunday we were at 1429 Union Street, my grandmother's house. So no, where you went to church, whatever you were doing, every Sunday I knew I was going to see my cousins at that house in Brooklyn, right? So we're trying to encourage more of that. And through these books and these talks, we try to work with young people, and not just, I know you all are seasoned, but I try to get the young people too, right? But we did this through this book, and we wanted to do that research, and we wanted to capture that and tell a story that was different. Because none of the story, what I just told you, had anything to do with anybody getting whelps across their back. Not that it didn't happen, but we have a richer history than just getting beat or getting a foot chopped off, right? And I wanted to help fill that hole in the literature, as we call it, of these other stories. And this book is full of short stories that my grandmother would tell us after the war. So he was pardoned as many people were. We found a copy of the pardon. How did I do that? You gotta go through the records. That wasn't gonna be online. I had to go to Union County, South Carolina, and start going through records. And that's why when there's a lot of young people in the room, they're like, what's microfiche? Who's this Dewey Decimal? Right? So they don't know that. They know Google. they do everything online. And I can't believe it. When I finished my last degree, Google Scholar was a friend for peer review. But I had to do that research, right? So I found out this man. I said, I want to see what Bill's tombstone is. So I look it up. I had to drive 20 minutes around all these woods because my family's all buried at the AME church. Bill's at the Presbyterian church 20 minutes away. All that land used to be the Dawkins. All of it was the Dawkins. So I said, what were they growing in South Carolina in the 1800s? So I learned what the cash crop was, and it wasn't cotton. It was cattle, it was potatoes, sweet potatoes, and other things. All right? I find Bill's will. Bill left the land to one to a nephew, right? His nephew from his brother, so this is a white young man. The other 2/3 were left to 2 of the 3 women that he had children with. He didn't leave any to mine because he found out his son was an abolitionist. So how do you give you back? I ain't giving you nothing. But they had to fight for it because the nephew was like, nah, these black women aren't getting anything. They had to go to court and fight through the system. And I believe it was the 14th Amendment to the Constitution is why they were able to secure that land and then build that church. But we found it all through the public record on paper. None of that was found on the internet, right? But I found copies of these things as well, and I found where these women fought for it. Now they died soon after of old age, but our family ended up owning that land. Well, sort of family, because this is other woman that I ain't from, but I gotta figure out how many cousins removed that is. The 8th cousin, 10th removed, I don't know. It's close, it's further enough away that if I met one and wanted to marry her, my kids would be all right. But I'm too old to be, look at this, I have no more children. But you find that kind of information. So I started writing. And then I'm gonna have focus groups and have conversations with them. And that's what they were really focus groups. Excuse me. I give them a $20 gift card for letting me borrow their time. That's what I learned in academia. That's what we would do. You'd come participate, we give you a gift card, thank you. So I try to do a lot of that. So I really wanted to be from the perspective of women and talk about this story, starting from when my great-grandfather used to have everybody around the potbelly stove in Philly on Sundays and have these conversations about, because family history is really important. And I vaguely remember Benjamin Franklin, my great-grandfather, because he died when I was like 4 or 5 years old. but I would have these conversations and wanted to document this history to fill the hole in the literature and also to tell a story. Now we're working to take Through Eyes and to make it into a play. I wanted to hit a stage. 2025 is 200 years since the beginning of this book, when Bill Dawkins came to America, his story. So next year will be 200 years. Am I math right? Yeah, 1920. Yeah, no, that is right, I think. Yeah. You would think I don't have a degree in accounting, but next year we want to tell that story on the stage. All right, so I'm working with a playwright to convert it into a play. Hard to capture because she's got a short film and she's won awards this year at Cannes Film Festival and all these other places. So tying her down is a little hard, but she's successful doing what she's doing, so I can't be mad at her. But I was intentional also. I said, who's going to write this play? A woman. She's going to take this book. And I didn't want to. I said, yeah, I can find a male playwright, but because I believe that she's going to be able to read it and translate it in a way that we won't. Right? So, and everything around this book, I really wanted to make it. I didn't want to just call it Through Her Eyes. I wanted to make it, if not strictly my grandmother, but through the lens of women who lived it. There were issues and situations that women dealt with from 1911 when my grandmother was born to the early 2000s when she passed, that never in life will I understand or live with, right? So we also tried to capture photos as much as I could. And interestingly enough, I had to get my uncle and aunts to sign a waiver so I could use pictures without being sued. I'm like, I have the photos, they don't. They've never even seen these photos. But since they're the eldest members of the family, I had to get a lawyer to write up a waiver so I could use photos. I said, you telling me I gotta get their permission to use a picture of my mother? Yes. I'm like, that's crazy. So in here, this is, like I have Phoebe Dawkins. This is, I kept talking about Benjamin Franklin Hill. That's his mother, she was born in 1860. That's her brother, he lived, oh God. Moses lived until 73, I think, right? So he lived a long time. I couldn't find pictures, but I also talked, if some of you are church members, right? I had to learn this, what a ring shot was. You ever see the call and response at church? It's called a ring shot, I didn't know. But it came out of enslavement, right? And somebody would say something and say it back. You see them in movies when they're building railroads. Somebody's chanting and everybody says a word and boom, it's a ring shot, right? And we didn't know what it was named for. I just said, that's for church. I didn't know it had a formal name. Or the dances. I'm going to, my next step was African ancestry. I did ancestry, DNA, African ancestry. So today's the 6th. On the 20th, I leave for Ghana for 2 weeks. I was able to trace my family history to Cameroon. I don't speak French and it's not that safe, so I can't go to Cameroon. But I can go to Ghana, as close as I can get right now. And I know what it's like to have a bodyguard, because when I used to go to Haiti, up to the clinic Morehouse School of Medicine I had a bodyguard then. If I went to Haiti now, I'd probably need a whole platoon. But back then, this is a while ago, we'd go and we'd be there for about a week and deliver babies, do rapid healthcare. And I said, why do I have a bodyguard? I've never had a bodyguard in my life. And then Haiti, so I said, if I go to Cameroon, I'm probably gonna need a couple. I don't want to spend the time. It's just not worth the risk, right? But I'm going to Ghana to go learn more, right? I'm gonna go to the W.B. Du Bois museum there and donate some books, right? But that's where we wanted to go with this. I don't want to be long-winded. I can talk about this book all day. I can talk about pictures in it, right? But I don't want to. I just really wanted to give you guys, so I love this picture. This is my, you'll see, grandmother and grandfather. Back when he passed when I was a young child as well. But that's a picture that I was able to find of the two of them. Again, that's my grandmother when my mom graduated. And down here, my grandfather worked for Bethlehem Steel. So another way, you research what is your family about. So my great-grandfather thought my grandparents were rich. They had a brownstone in Brooklyn, that's to this day, 8 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, his kitchen on the main level and the kitchen on the 3rd floor, and a basement. He thought they were rich. He worked for Bethlehem Steel, and my grandmother, and this is the house in the book, this is the house my cousins want me to sell that I won't let them sell, all right? But I was also able to find my grandfather's draft card, and my cousin had a copy of May's Beauty Nook, my grandmother's Rosa May Woodall, right?
This was her business card when she was an entrepreneur. When she said she used to do women's hair, and she said until perms became the rage, and then she stopped, right? So she was an entrepreneur, but we don't know that about our family sometimes, and I didn't know. My cousin said, I got a business card. I was like, scan it and send it to you. So we find these artifacts in addition to burial programs, or funeral programs, excuse me. There's other artifacts that aren't going to be on Ancestry.com. So I encourage people to interview their elders. One of my uncles had some mental health issues. I never understood why my grandmother treated him the way he did. And it was very caring. It was caring. Even one time when he got beside himself and put his hands on my grandmother, and my dad and uncles had to restrain him, I never understood why she was that way. And I can't ask her, but I got a sense of it, because her brother John had some mental health issues. And when they moved from Philly to New York, they lost touch with him. And when it was time for him to get released, he couldn't get released because they couldn't find a family member. And eventually he died and was buried in, I forget what it's called. When they bury you when you don't have any family, Potter. Yeah. And it affected my grandmother, and she wrote about it. So I understood, it gave me an idea. I said, but maybe that's why she treated Uncle Jackie the way she did, because of that, right? But throughout the book, as many pictures as I could, I tried to capture them in the book. Bill Dawkins, Master Dawkins' tombstone. I went to that, and I talked to the pastor at the Presbyterian church. I said, isn't that about the Dawkins family? He said, sure, let me go grab him. And I was like, this was a fruitful Sunday. And I got to talk to people at the AME church and the Presbyterian church, and got to see the difference in the services, right? And here's a copy of the pardon, right? So this is when Bill Dawkins was pardoned from the President of the United States after it, and even when the Union was dissolved. I was able to find all of these artifacts and tried to capture them, and even when they tried to participate when Randall was taking people through the Underground Railroad, we went through Missouri, which was a slave state, and was able to find Mary Meacham River crossing in St. Louis, if anybody's from the Midwest. You were able to cross from Missouri into Illinois, which was a free state. So it even talks about how they tried to go from South Carolina. Everybody didn't go up to Canada and even migration patterns were based on where in the South you were. You ended up in Chicago and Detroit if you were like in Mississippi and Alabama. If you were a little farther west, South Carolina, North Carolina, and maybe Georgia, you ended up in the Northeast. But it talks about the migration patterns of the Great Migration. And some of these kids don't know what the Great Migration is. You say, oh, what is that? You know. So I've been able to go visit Missouri and learn about the Mary Meacham River crossing when Randall and others were getting people to come from the South and go up through, again, Missouri, cross the river, the Mississippi, and I saw that river. I was like, I couldn't imagine crossing in a boat, much less whatever piece of wood they were trying to cross this around. I mean, you really wanted to be free. It was like freedom or death, because that's what you were going to get crossing that. And we even talk about the Fugitive Slave Act and how that impacted things. And this is a symbol that I'm trying to teach kids about. This was the abolitionist symbol. A lot of people, these things, and they're working through not teaching those things in school anymore. And even the rewards. I found where there was a reward that Bill Dawkins had for fugitive slaves. All right? So there's a lot here. There's a chapter called Weeping Time. It's just all sorts of stories that I tried to weave into these stories and try to teach people about how they can do their own research on their families and why is it important. Because your story is different than mine. Alex Haley, Arthur Vaughn, others is not the full picture. It's so much diverse. I talked to one woman who's from Haiti. I showed her, there's a Facebook group where you can trace your ancestry if you're from the Caribbean. If you stopped on triangular trade, which everybody doesn't know what that is, but if some people got dropped off in the West Indies, right? Some in the Dominican Republic, some in Haiti. But how do I trace my history now if I was dropped off in Haiti? And I even talk about the revolution of Haiti and how people feared it in America, right? Because after the enslaved people in Haiti revolted, more and more people in the southern United States were afraid if that can happen there, that can happen here. So I even speak to that here, and I was able to share with one young lady how she could trace her own history, including her history through Haiti and DR. So I'm going to stop talking And any questions? I'll try to be brief. I promise. No, I don't want to text. Any questions?
No questions, but I definitely, appreciate you sharing like your story. Because like right now, I've been doing some research like through Ancestry, just trying to find out more about like my family and where we came from, because it's so convoluted. Most of those people have passed on. So
Which part of the country or world?
say again.
Which part of the country or world? I don't assume everybody was great, but
Well,
whatever.
I'm from South Carolina,
Oh.
originally born and raised. I moved here probably about 9 years ago, and so like the story, for me, like my grandmother from my dad's side, like she passed away probably when I was like 19, and until recently, I didn't know she had siblings until I looked on Ancestry. She's got like 8 siblings and things like that, and it's kind of convoluted on my mom's side because she was a product of an affair and things of that nature, so people don't talk. So just trying to find out those things and just to kind of really understand like where I'm from and and like you said, that story. So to like hear that and be in alignment with that is very, it's very insightful.
And I'll be back up in South Carolina soon. I'm going to be doing some work for Morris College in Sumter.
Where Sumter is, yeah. Down 601.
Is that where it is? Not here. I'll be staying in Columbia. Right?
Yes, do that. Do that.
Any other?
Columbia,
Yeah. Any other questions?
I just got one.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a James and George Ann Hill on my family tree, but most of them have determined they were in this area, then migrated to the Atlanta area. I have not found anything from them.
Well, our hill comes from, he's Native American, so the story goes, Pompey. And he ended up in Union County, and this was after the Civil War, and it was stirring up the freed people. And they said he got, as it was written, he got chased away from the crackers by crackers and never heard from him again. So they don't know if he got away or if he was strange fruit hanging from a southern tree. They don't know. They just know he was gone. Y'all remember that song? You know. Yeah. But I said that to my kids. I said, "What's that mean?" I said, "We're gonna go to Savannah to the weeping tree, and then we can talk about it up under that tree in Savannah." And that's what we did. So my middle daughter went to Savannah State. So I said, "I'll talk about it under the tree." Then I'll tell you what that means. Well, I want to put it in context for you. Yeah. Any other questions? What are you gonna do with this information? You're gonna find your grandkids and kids and talk to them and be like, "Hey, we got some work to do." That's what I'm hoping. When I do these things, that's what I want people to do. Go back and find their kids and their grandkids, and let's start. And let's add to the literature and add to the book so we can tell the story and the richness of our history.
And I tell them to look in their closets and attics and basements and see if they have old pictures and documents. And when somebody died, don't throw it away because it's old.
No. I'm digitizing everything, but I also recognize in my lifetime we went from records to cassettes, the CDs, so I was like, I gotta do it in a way in which, as technology advances, we can convert it to this new medium, right? Because I don't know what the next medium is gonna be, but it's gonna be another one. Any other? Yes, ma'am.
I was just, today me and my cousin was talking about ancestry and, looking, our family members up, doing a family tree, adding things to it, and this is very interesting, because you're talking about the research. I wanna know how to do it,
Well, you know what? Can we make sure take out your phone, let me give you my phone number. Easiest way to get me is text me, email it's in my phone, but a text message is much quicker. And I'll help, I'm happy to do it, because I had to learn from this gentleman named Herman Skip Mason, this genealogist. I'm going to Ghana with Skip on the 20th. That's hard, between him and Henry Louis Gates, because Skip Mason introduced me to Herman Skip Gates, or Henry Louis Gates, right? So that's why he called himself Skip Mason, because of Dr. Gates. And one introduced me to the other. I'm not gonna start calling myself Skip, but yeah, I'll leave that to them. But it's 404. You can tell I've been in Georgia. I still got a 404 cell number. You can't get that no more. Because I've had the same cell since 1995. 404-660-0054. And, you know, sometimes we do Zoom sessions on how to trace your genealogy. So, you know, I want anybody that's interested, we try to get through wherever we can find you and say, let's talk about it. Let's answer your questions. This is not something I want to charge people for. It. Somebody bless me with that information, let me share it. So definitely text, call, whatever. And if I have your email, I'll invite you when we do these things.
Well, that's good because I've tried it on different occasions, and then I reached this point where I don't know what to do next. I don't know where to go next.
Yeah.
And so it just sits there, and nothing happens with it until some event occurs or somebody mentions something. Then I'll go back and maybe try to pull it out and look at it, but it still doesn't come together like I would like for it to come together, to build a story.
Yeah, the next year, I'm gonna write this, 1954. And my aunts and uncles aren't here, right? So I'm gonna have to get their kids. I'm like, you know more about they're my uncle, but you know more about me than I do. So I'm gonna get them in a room and have a focus group with each set of cousins. Like, just talk. Tell me about your mom, tell me about your dad. What don't I know? Assume I know nothing. So assume I didn't grow up with these people, even though I did. There's stuff, you know, I went in your house every day. Tell me about it. And it might not be a book, but it'll at least be documented so we can go from 1950 to later on. And then somebody else can pick it up at some point, right? But I wanted to make sure while I'm still here that I can do that. And you need to understand, last thing I'm gonna say, you're gonna find somebody in your family, before you put pen to paper, they're ready to discredit whatever you got to say. You hadn't written a thing, you hadn't said anything, but they've already made up in their mind that they know more than you do, even though you've done nothing yet, but they're gonna be ready to say what you got is wrong. And I was like, how is that possible? A date is a date. The calendar doesn't change. but you can ignore that, and that's okay. Let them do it. I mean, hey, whatever. They got a different lens than you, that's fine. But don't let that be a deterrent, because it's gonna happen. It's gonna be a cousin, or aunt, or uncle. Somebody's gonna tell you don't. That's okay. But that's, you know, thank you again for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well,
I'm gonna go sit down.
You're fine. Well, I want to say I so appreciate you because when I was in high school, I had to do a family reunion project, and I actually used the funeral home here in Barrow County because my family's here. So Eberhard was amazing because they had a lot of the obituaries of my family member. So I was able to pull different obituaries of different family members, and I'm looking at my aunts because I need to make sure that, like you said, those conversations need to be had, and I need to. I think we've all talked about like the things I've gathered about like Grandma Claudie and things like that, but we've had family members to live late in their years. You know, we've had just really unique things, and so I was able to pull so many different obituaries because Eberhard was the only funeral home in this area that funeralized African American Black families. And I was able to, you know, back then, you know, to pull those obituaries, and like you said, to kind of, you know, say, okay, this, and kind of pinpoint, you know, the different people that maybe you've heard their names, but you didn't know what their roles were, you know, during that time. But yeah, so that was something I did. Did I do anything else? I have created this beautiful binder, and it's all there.
And if you have a family member that served in the military, I found my dad's DD-214, his discharge papers. And at the time, Johnny Isaacson's daughter used to work for me, so I got to meet Senator Isaacson, who's congressman back then. He got the records. My dad had 4 Bronze Stars. And you can Google and say what you get a Bronze Star for, but he was able to get the records to say literally what happened. And I was like, 4 Bronze Stars? I asked one of my friends in the military, I said, tell me about a Bronze Star. He said, man, so 2 things, your dad killed somebody and your dad saved a bunch of people. You don't get a Bronze Star just for being in the military. He said, somebody had to die and so somebody else could live, and it was significant. I said, he got 4 of them. So Senator Isaacson was able to help us not only to see the record that was written by the commanding officer that says why I'm nominating you for this. So if you can get the DD-214, that's what it's called for any branch of the military when they're discharged, that tells you, and it'll tell you what they were awarded for, but then you can use that to do the history back to see, you know, what their military service was truly like. I didn't mention BD 214, but that's another one.
Yeah, I mean, and that's amazing, and we so appreciate you and all the information that you shared, because again, I hadn't really thought anymore about this book and all the things that, you know, I had gathered for this project like over 30 years ago is on the shelf, you know? And so, you know, to hear and, you know, and to just see the connection and different things that we were able to pull from what you shared with us, and to just be so open to allow us to reach out to you to continue and to help put that narrative out of the stories of our rich history within our own families. And so I greatly appreciate you for coming out today and sharing your knowledge and your willingness to, you know, help us to take and go to that next step. So, I really
Thank you.
appreciate it. And so you guys today, Dr. Arthur Vaughn, he has some books for sale. Please check out his books. And again, I had met Dr. Vaughn. I had met Arthur, you know, prior to his heart transplant, and so yeah, I really want to kind of check out the Survivor's Remorse. So definitely, even though he talked about Through Her Eyes, both books are here. Both books are available for sale, but you have his cell phone number. Please definitely connect. Please connect, you know, him with other things that you guys are doing that may be beneficial to you further, and also to him. Again, I greatly appreciate it. So please, if you don't mind, you know, talk with him, get some coffee, get some snacks, you know, and if possible, I would love to take, you know, some of you guys' pictures, just, you know, with you know, Arthur.
Yeah,
That's
one
all.
last thing, if I could. If you are having a family reunion or know somebody that has, sometimes on Fridays we have that reception where I'd be more than happy to talk to Jeannie out. No, I'm not charging nobody any money. Just saying. I'd love to come out and share how a whole family can listen on how they can trace their roots beyond the people at that family reunion. So if you know someone having one, just let me know. I enjoy this work, so I'm happy to do it. Now, to family reunions in South Carolina, if it's in Georgia, we good. If it's in South Carolina, maybe I'm up there at Morris College.
I can't say that honestly. It's been well. I think the last family reunion that I went to, my youngest was 6 months old. He's 18 now, and I think that was like one of the last few.
Sounds like you got some hosting to do.
You just don't hear about family reunions.
I mean, it's
that
just,
much
you know,
anymore.
like, I think what it was, I know for us, is
Yeah,
like
yeah,
after
we
my
just-
aunt
You
passed,
did?
it just.
We had one.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That matriarch is tough. Somebody's got to step in on the matriarch. Yeah, because it's never the patriarch. The guys, yeah, we
No.
on the grill somewhere. But the matriarch is.
Yeah, and it was my aunt for sure, you know.
And what you're saying, yes, yeah, I'm
You
sorry.
know, my grandfather, he came from South Carolina.
Let me move close on
He
here.
walked, they say he walked, he would live to be 114 years
Mhm.
old.
Nice.
He walked from South Carolina all the way, I'm sure it took him months. You know, he probably walked and stopped somewhere and stayed and walked and
From South
walked.
Carolina to
And
where?
I guess the eggs was calling, you know. So when he got to Winder, that's where he
He
stayed.
was from South Carolina to Winder,
That's a
He
lot.
walked all the way all the way up 29.
and we gonna walk around the track for my same shit.
Research is like, oh, they just moved here to Georgia.
That's how I'm part of the reverse grade migration. My parents and grandparents moved north, and now we all came back.
Back down south, yeah.
I used to live like this in New York.
Right.
Somebody from New
But
York
that's the
complains, I'm like.
they went up there when they were younger and worked and, you know, made money, and then when it was time for them to retire and pension, they moved back down, like my great uncle, that's what he did, he worked for some department for like years, and then he retired. He came back home to South Carolina, and that, you know, that's pretty much where he stayed until like he passed away.
My dad did that in Murfreesboro, before Murfreesboro was big. Middle Tennessee State, when we were kids, Murfreesboro was farmland. Now Middle Tennessee State is there, all these other industries, and this was all farm. It wasn't suburban Nashville then, it was the country. Now it's suburban Nashville.
Yeah, what my aunts, they were mentioning, our family just had a family reunion.
And I think that part of what you mentioned, the reason why, the importance of the family reunion, how it came to be, because I think so often we're like, oh, we'll meet, because I of course, I didn't get a chance to go, but, you know, but for us to understand that importance and why it came to be, maybe will help to drive that narrative, why it's important to document, to share those stories and things like that, so that narrative can get out. Because so often we dismiss it, oh, okay, well, you know, I'll see my aunts later, I'll see whoever later, but it was my grandmother's sisters, and, you know, their children and things like that. And so, yeah.
And lastly, we need to tell the story for another reason. Ava DuVernay said it, and I experienced it. So part of my education was in Europe, right? And I'm not saying that to say, God, this guy's smart in Europe. No, it's just part, it just is. I studied in Europe, and as did my oldest daughter. In Germany, they talk about the Holocaust. But we don't want to talk about enslavement. They talk about the Holocaust. We can put up a Confederate flag. You put up a swastika in Germany, you're going to jail. It's going to jail. You can't hire Hitler, you're going to jail. I mean, it's not like you get a ticket, you're going to jail. But at the same time, there's monuments to it all over the place. Not monuments celebrating it, it's educational. It's saying what used to be here before Nazi Germany. So they didn't put up a monument to Hitler. They said this used to be whatever, whatever, before Nazi Germany, right? So whatever it used to be, they're celebrating what used to be, but not celebrating what took it away. But they're educating you on, this is part of our history that we don't want to repeat. But you will not put up a swastika, you will not say Heil Hitler unless you like prison. So they're not celebrating it, but they're making sure that the Jewish and non-Jewish community in Germany understands the history of what has happened.
That's why people want to hide the history of things, so you'll be unaware of it, and it's a possibility that it can repeat itself. If you're teaching and people are learning, then and it's out there. You don't
People
want
around
to
it
do
learn
that.
too. I was in Amsterdam for a while as part of my education. My dumb self. I ordered Heineken. They said, "You know, German beer." And they wasn't mean. They're like, "We got our own breweries. You will not find." I didn't know. I just they're like, in Amsterdam, they invaded us. Oh no. This how many years later you're not gonna find a Heineken in that? You'll get a Corona because that's Mexican. But you won't find no German beer. So it's just interesting when you go to other parts of the world. It expands your view of all of us and not just what we learn in our smaller communities in the grand ecosystem.
No, you're good. Well, again, you guys, I so greatly appreciate you for being here. Arthur will be here to talk with you, but I'm going to go ahead and bring this to a close. Our next event will be July the 18th, and we'll be here at 5:30, and we will have Mr. and Mrs. Creekmore, their counselors, and they're going to talk about the connection and the connections that you have like in school, your workplace, and how to avoid burnout and things like that. So again, we're going to have the Creekmores, and they will be here on July the 18th, and I would love it for you guys to come and join us again. So again, thank you, Arthur, for being here and sharing your wealth of knowledge. You guys are welcome to, stay after. Please purchase a book. Please connect with him, and definitely get snacks. And I have goodie bags for you guys as well, because I do have a couple of sponsors. And also, again, thank you guys for coming out tonight.
And thank you, Dedra, for putting this together for us.
Yes, thank you.
For bringing
Thank you.
Dr. Vaughn to us. So
Yes.
thank you both for being here.
And thank you for being so amazing.
Thank you, all around.